Flight tickets usually cost around $200, but that's about to change real fast. Today, you click on a flight for $199, add a checked bag, pick a seat, maybe pay to bring the carry-on you assumed was included. Suddenly, your flight cost you $500, and that would already be frustrating enough. But in 2026, the bigger problem isn't just the extra fees. The government has proposed changing how airlines can present those prices. The total fare would still have to be shown under the current proposal, but now airlines have more flexibility to sneak in extra costs. But how bad is the situation really? Airfare inflation is already here. Let's start with the part that's already happening. No proposals, no fine print, just the actual cost of getting on a plane going up. And the problem isn't just that your next plane ticket might cost a little more. It's that the entire cost of traveling is starting to creep upward, and that's happening while Americans are already dealing with higher prices almost everywhere else. Groceries, rent, insurance, gas, utilities. Now add the cost of getting out of town, and the numbers behind it are starting to get ugly. In April, US airline fares jumped nearly 5% in a single month. By July, airfare was being reported at roughly 25% higher than the year before. Meanwhile, our incomes are still the same. But here's where this starts becoming more than an inconvenience. People are changing their behavior, they're cutting trips shorter, they're looking for cheaper airlines, they're leaving bags at home, and some are simply deciding that the vacation they've been saving for isn't worth the price anymore. And that's how inflation really starts to hurt. Not when something becomes completely unaffordable overnight. It's when you slowly start giving things up. The weekend trip, the family vacation, the visit to relatives across the country. You tell yourself you'll go next year. Then next year gets more expensive too. And eventually, you don't even remember the last time flying felt cheap. The airline fee machine. So how did we get here? Well, the price you see on the screen isn't necessarily the price you'll end up paying. Because somewhere along the way, airlines figured out they could take the flight apart. Want to check a bag? That's extra. Want to choose your seat? Extra. Want more leg room? Extra. Want to board earlier? Extra. Want the flexibility to change your flight? You guessed it. Extra. And individually, none of these fees seem outrageous. That's what makes them so effective. $10 here, $30 there, $50 somewhere else. By the time you're sitting on the plane, you've paid for half a dozen things that you probably assumed were part of the ticket in the first place. And this isn't some tiny side business for the airlines. A Senate investigation looking at just 5 major US airlines, American, Delta, United, Frontier, and Spirit, found they collected $12.4 billion in seat fees alone between 2018 and 2023. In 2023, those 5 airlines brought in more than $3 billion from seat fees. Think about that for a second. Billions of dollars, just for deciding where you're going to sit. And that's only one category of fee. The real trick isn't making one fee enormous. It's making dozens of small fees feel too insignificant to fight about. And before you know it, your flight is costing you $1,000. The bag fee explosion. And then there are the bags. This is where those little fees start getting really expensive, because $50 doesn't sound like a disaster. You can probably convince yourself it's not a big deal. But now imagine you're traveling with your family, 4 people, 2 bags each. You're suddenly looking at $400 in baggage fees alone. And that's before you've even paid for the seats, the flight, or the hotel. And this isn't some new trick that just appeared overnight. US airlines collected about $6.8 billion in baggage fees in 2022, roughly twice what they were collecting a decade earlier. And 5 major airlines alone brought in $25.3 billion from checked bag fees over a 6-year period, according to a Senate investigation. That's an incredible amount of money being generated from something passengers used to think of as a normal part of flying, and the fees keep creeping upward. In 2026, American Airlines raised its checked bag prices again, with the first bag reaching $50 or $45 when prepaid, while a second bag could cost $60 or $55 prepaid. And that's the thing about fees. Nobody panics over $5. Nobody cancels a vacation over $10. But $10 becomes $20, $20 becomes $50, and then you multiply it by 4 people, 2 bags, and a round trip. Suddenly, you're spending hundreds of dollars just to bring your clothes with you. And that's when the $199 flight starts looking very different. Enter the government. On July 1st, 2026, the Department of Transportation published a proposal with a very bureaucratic name, Enhancing Flexibility of Airfare Price Advertising. And whenever the government gives something a name like that, it's probably worth reading the fine print. Right now, airlines and ticket sellers are required to show you the total advertised price up front, including applicable government taxes, fees, and mandatory carrier charges. Pretty simple. You see the price. You know what you're getting into. But the proposed changes would give airlines more freedom over how the individual pieces of that price are displayed. The base fare, the taxes, the fees, they could potentially be displayed just as prominently as the total price itself. And some of the existing restrictions on things like font size and how prominently those components can appear would be removed. Now, to be fair, this isn't the government saying airlines can hide the total price. The total would still be required under the current proposal. But think about what happens when you're shopping for a flight. You're scrolling through dozens of options. One says $199, another says $240, another says $280. You're naturally going to gravitate toward the $199 flight. That's the number that gets your attention. And now, imagine an airline has even more freedom to decide how that $199 is presented to you. Suddenly, this isn't just about airline fees anymore. It's about who controls the number you see first. And it gets even more interesting. The Department of Transportation is also asking whether the underlying full fare rule itself should eventually be repealed, either completely or in part. So while airlines are making money by breaking the cost of a flight into smaller pieces, the rules governing how those pieces are shown are now being reconsidered. And if you're a passenger, there's one obvious question. Who exactly benefits when the price becomes harder to understand? Why this matters? Think of it like a restaurant menu that lists a steak for $24, but doesn't mention the sides cost extra until the bill arrives. You didn't lie about the steak price. You just let the customer build their own final number, one small addition at a time, long after they'd already decided to sit down. Your brain has already registered that first number. $199 feels cheap. $299 feels expensive. Even if both numbers eventually add up to around $340 once everything is included, the number you saw first is the one that shapes how you feel about the whole purchase. That's why the fight over how these numbers get displayed actually matters, even if the total is technically still shown somewhere on the page. Airlines and industry groups have argued that giving consumers more flexibility in how prices and taxes are broken down is a reasonable modern update. Consumer advocates have countered that prominent, upfront total pricing is what actually lets people compare different airlines fairly. DOT's own proposal lays out both sides of that argument directly. The even bigger question. Now stretch this out a little further. Airfare is already running roughly 25% higher than it was a year ago. At some point, the question stops being simply, can I afford a plane ticket, and starts becoming, can I actually afford this whole trip? This isn't just airlines, and it's worth zooming out here because airlines aren't the only industry doing this. This broader pattern is often called drip pricing, and it shows up across hotels, car rentals, ticketing platforms, and travel booking apps generally. A genuinely fresh example from 2026 involves the travel app Hopper. In July 2026, the FTC announced that Hopper's operating companies agreed to pay $35 million and stop certain practices the agency alleged involved hidden fees and misleading representations of total prices and specific benefits. That matters here because it's not just an accusation of companies hide fees in the abstract. It's a federal agency actually building a case around deceptive fee practices and reaching a real settlement over it. What that tells you is that the travel industry as a whole has gotten extremely good at separating the price you notice from the price you actually pay. The airline defense. To be fair, this shouldn't turn into a one-sided rant against airlines, because there's a real argument on their side too. The whole logic of unbundling is that a passenger who doesn't want a checked bag, a specific seat, priority boarding, or extra legroom can, in theory, pay less by skipping all of it. And honestly, there's something legitimate there. Why should someone traveling with just a backpack subsidize someone checking 3 oversized suitcases? Why should someone who doesn't care where they sit pay the same as someone who specifically wants extra legroom? That's a fair question. The real problem starts somewhere else entirely, when the cheapest possible price becomes the headline marketing number, and the realistic, full price only becomes visible after 15 minutes of clicking through. Options at checkout. Inflation doesn't always show up as one gigantic price increase. Sometimes it's $5 here, $10 there, a new fee, a slightly higher bag charge, a seat that used to just be included. A flight that used to cost $200 slowly becomes $230, then $260, then $300, and somewhere along the way, that stops registering as a shock until the higher price stops feeling expensive and simply becomes the new normal. So the next time you see a $199 flight pop up on your screen, don't celebrate just yet. Ask what that $199 actually gets you.